In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And God said, "Let there be light." The gathering together of the waters called he seas. God created man in his own image.
For more than 1,500 years, Christians saw the Bible as the primary source of knowledge. But in the 17th century, a new movement emerged that challenged the Christian view of the world. The scientific revolution.
It was a time when people were looking towards a new way of thinking about the world.
During the Renaissance, the rising power of science forced the Catholic Church to silence rebellious scientists.
The sentence says, "The reason that you're burning is because you denied the divinity of Jesus and because you questioned our authority."
By the 19th century, the Enlightenment had given rise to a new generation of scientists who pushed Christianity into retreat.
Darwin removed the main argument for God's existence.
If science continues to make discoveries that conflict with Christian doctrine, I wonder, will the scientific revolution ultimately make Christianity redundant? What we now call science emerged about 400 years ago through the work of a group of European thinkers who discovered new ways of interpreting the world. They no longer relied on the delivered word of God. The scientific revolution put individual curiosity, inquiry, reason, and experiment above religious dogma. To my mind, science is quite simply the biggest challenge that Christianity will ever have to face. I don't believe in God. Some scientists manage to retain their faith, but I think science is our only route to knowledge, an idea that some people still find threatening. Nowadays we all recognize the power of science. We look to science to explain the world, to solve our problems. But science also has its enemies. I myself was subjected for 15 years to a campaign of hatred and terror from animal rights activists because of the research that I did. Perhaps it's because science necessarily challenges the orthodox view of the day in order to make progress. And often that orthodoxy is fundamentally religious. Today, I'm Professor of Neuroscience here at Oxford. When the first colleges were founded in the 12th century, the Christian Church was planting the seeds of science. Oxford's been a seat of learning for more than 900 years. Just 30 years after the Norman invasion in 1066, scholars were teaching here. Oxford became a centre for discussion, for debate, for investigation, all of it sponsored and encouraged by the Christian Church. The motto of the university says it all, really. Dominus illuminatio mea. God is my light. Believing that God had given humans the power of reason, the Church championed the beginnings of science, assuming it would confirm their faith. This is the old school's quadrangle. It was built in the early 17th century, and it was the focus of all the teaching of the university. It's dominated by the divinity school. There's logic, metaphysics, grammar and history. There's mathematics. There's astronomy. And here, the school of natural philosophy. Natural philosophy was the 17th century word for science. Science being nurtured in an ecclesiastical environment as part of a religious and classical education. For hundreds of years, Christians had looked to the leading experts on the natural world, the ancient Greeks, to explain God's creation.
In Christianity, there is a central notion that God created the world. Aristotle, however, probably the most important of the Greek natural philosophers, argued that the cosmos was eternal. They thought that many Christian ideas were rather silly.
Right from the start, rational thinkers forced Christians to consider the possibility that the biblical explanation of the world was wrong. In the 5th century, the Christian theologian St. Augustine came up with a solution.
He says the message we find in the Bible is accommodated to human capacities, which is to say that the Bible speaks in language that we can understand. And this then will account for some of the discrepancies between what we find in Genesis and what we find in the current or contemporary science.
St. Augustine laid down the rules for the relationship between science and Christianity. The Church would accommodate science's findings as long as they didn't threaten its authority. For the next 1,000 years, Christianity remained firmly in control of all knowledge and helped generate the first glorious period of the scientific revolution, the Renaissance.
Hard to believe, but in about 1510, one of the most significant developments of the Renaissance took place not in glorious Rome, or in Venice, or in Florence, but here, in this sleepy little town on the Baltic coast, in Poland.
While Italy was the centre of Renaissance art and literature, a local priest made Poland the focal point for science. Nicholas Copernicus came here in the mid-16th century after studying in Italy and took services at Frombork Cathedral. But he spent most of his time watching the sky and studying the movements of planets. In this tower in the cathedral grounds, Copernicus made an extraordinary discovery that led to science's first major challenge to Christian belief.
So, Margaret, what was the standard dogma in astronomy at the time that Copernicus began to study astronomy?
The Earth was thought to be surrounded by unchanging stars, and Christians believed it was the centre of the universe. They thought the Sun and the planets circled round a supposedly stationary Earth.
But in his study, Copernicus wrote a book that argued against this Christian view. He claimed that the Earth was actually one of the planets orbiting the Sun.
Copernicus finished his masterpiece in 1533, and he knew his ideas were revolutionary.
The Vatican realized that Copernicus's speculations contradicted the biblical view that the Earth is stationary, at the center of the universe. But it was willing to tolerate his ideas, for now.
The Catholic Church was a powerful institution. How could it be threatened by one person, even if his ideas were revolutionary? The Pope was hoping that despite all his research, Copernicus's conclusions would be proved wrong.
But there's no doubt that here in Frombork, in the heart of the church, Copernicus planted a seed of tension between religious authority and human inquiry, which has grown over the following 500 years. It was others who followed Copernicus, who invented science to test his views, who suffered for championing his dangerous idea.
Copernicus's new theory soon pitted science and Christianity against each other in the scientific revolution's darkest hour.
This was a true tragedy, because the church is made of human beings who don't want to admit they're wrong.
As a scientist today, I'm free to put forward any idea as long as I can back it up with evidence.